p.m. The Lunchroom. Informative, enlightening, provocative, engaging. The Lunchroom on RCI. Food for thought. The station that gives you, more lunch.
Pleasant good afternoon to you, and welcome to the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. It's Wednesday, the 12th of March, 2025. This is program 1336 of the Lunchroom. I'm your host, Calix George Jr., and of course, we are on radio 101.1 FM. You can also get us at the website, rcisaintlucia.com. You can download our older shows on that platform if you so choose, if you missed it. And we can also be found on Facebook. Just have to search for the official page of Radio Caribbean International. Please like and share that as well with your friends and family. Now, of course, if you want to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, the number to do so is 452-3046. Again, 452-3046. And we can also reach on WhatsApp, 724-0008. Now, a bit of history for today, and we go back to the year 1455, the first record of Johannes Gutenberg's Bible, letter dated this day by Enea Silvio Piccolomini, referred to the Bible printed a year earlier. 1918, fearing foreign invasion, Vladimir Lenin shifts revolutionary capital of Russia to Petrograd. From Petrograd, which was and of course now today St. Petersburg, and he shifted it to Moscow. In 1930, on this day, Mahatma Gandhi began his famous 200-mile protest march against the widely hated British salt tax. And in the year 1944, the Church of England ordained its first 32 female priests, and that happened at Bristol Cathedral in England. We now move on to our dish of the day. The daily dish is brought to you the kind compliments of our good friends at Tiles Plus.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. Need all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gasway and vanity. Boss, you'll see. Come down to mind nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Lance Road in Castries, Bossage Grizzlies, and Flag Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939. Tiles Plus.
Serving now, the Daily Dish.
Welcome back to the Lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, there was a meeting of the House of Assembly, and that, of course, saw some debate on some new initiatives being brought forward. One of them, of course, is the matter of the what is known as the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and we're going to get to that in a bit. But of course, there was also another matter of the introduction of judge-only trials, and I think that seemed to have. That was presented by the island's Attorney General, bringing that forward, that shift in the arrangements within the judiciary to permit that from happening. And of course, he's making the point that in many other jurisdictions, they've in fact have begun introducing those types of trials in some matters, which don't require, therefore, an entire jury. Now, of course, the challenges with juries is that you quite often have to go out. You got to get a number of individuals, usually about 12. And in fact, you've got to get more than that in the event that some of them drop out. And it can be a very long process, especially in a small country like ours. I think they brought the number down at one point to 9. But of course, it still is a lengthy process and quite often does require more resources to be able to ensure that persons participate. Of course, there's time involved, people have work, and so you're taking them away from their work. It could be a potential loss um, of productivity in some regards. But it has generally been seen as a form of the common law English system of fairness in terms of trials. But just to read that article coming out of the St. Lucia Times on the matter, it reads as follows. St. Lucia is moving closer to judge-only trials following the presentation of the Criminal Code Amendment and Supreme Court Amendment bills by Attorney General Leslie Mondesi at Tuesday's sitting of the House of Assembly. The amendments aim to address the growing backlog of criminal cases in the High Court by allowing defendants to opt for trials decided solely by a judge rather than a jury. Mondesi explained that this change would help expedite the judicial process, particularly for cases involving complex evidence or those that have garnered pre-trial publicity. Judge-only trials would be suited for certain types of cases, he said. You may have a high-profile case, a serious case, a murder trial, or a long and complex case which involves technical evidence. You may have a case that has garnered pre-trial publicity. Graphic evidence may be led in a trial. You may have allegations of intimidation or threats to jurors or bias. So you may want to have a judge-only trial. Additionally, the Supreme Court Amendment Bill redefines the term verdict to include decisions made by a judge alone, streamlining the process further. The move comes amid mounting concerns over delays in the legal system, with Mondesi acknowledging that the criminal division of the High Court is struggling with a significant backlog. They are unable to dispose of these cases in a timely manner, he said, highlighting the urgent need for reform. Weaknesses within the judicial system, such as jurors' lack of interest, jury tampering, and threats against jurors, were also identified as key factors driving the need for the amendments. Support for the amendments came from both government and opposition members, with Cashie's Central MP and Housing Minister Richard Frederick illustrating the pressing challenges within the judicial system that he said, quote, prevents expeditious hearings and leaves people in prisons. Leader of the opposition, Alan Shastney, also endorsed the changes, noting that groundwork for such reforms had been laid during his 2016 to 2021 administration. However, he cautioned that other systemic issues remain. Quote, this is a very important step for St. Lucia, the Miku South MP said. We've seen the backlog of cases, and while there may be great expectations that a judge-only trial is going to help expedite those, I think it will. I don't think that the total panacea, I don't think that's the total panacea that we're looking for. There are some other issues that we will have to resolve, Shastney said. Shastney also pointed out that while securing jurors has historically been difficult, an issue that judge-only trials could help resolve, the switch is going to put tremendous pressure on the integrity and the ability of our judges. St. Lucia is joining a long list of countries that conduct judge-alone trials, including Jamaica, Antigua and Barbuda, Belize, St. Kitts and Nevis, the Cayman Islands, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. And that story, as I mentioned, coming out of Karen Nelson from the St. Lucia Times. Now, of course, we have heard time and time again the issue of how long it takes to be able to get rulings, get verdicts coming out of our court systems. And the same for civil matters, and it is perhaps even worse for criminal matters. And so the need, especially at this time when we are facing the issue of dealing with such a heavy crime burden, it is certainly seen perhaps as a means by which some cases can be expedited. Of course, it is an optional matter, and so it will not apply in all cases, but certainly in many such matters, it certainly is going to hopefully result in some pickup in the rate at which those cases can be heard. In some jurisdictions, I'm not saying that this is what is going to apply here, but in some places, what they do is that they create a panel of judges. That has been seen in the past, or you create a panel, what they call lay magistrates, perhaps, and you got a one judge and two lay magistrates, something to that effect. And so sometimes we have adopted systems coming out of larger countries, and perhaps they don't always fit into our realities. We've seen that in the case of Parliament, and how we see in our system, Parliament is quite often, you could say, dominated by the executive. Much harder to do so in a larger country where you have a very large parliament, oftentimes 100 plus, over maybe in the case of the United Kingdom, 650 MPs. So the cabinet of maybe 20, 30 individuals is dwarfed by the larger parliament. And so the parliament still has some level of independence in and of itself, as opposed to here where the majority overpowers the rest of the size of the parliament, and everybody is in cabinet, and so you have a cabinet-led parliament in the case of many small island states. In the case of the issue of juries, the challenge is that jury pool is largely just about 100,000, 120,000 or so adults, or whatever number it is, who can in fact participate. And so it does pose a level of a bit of a challenge in that regard. Even in larger countries, you will find that jurors end up having to come back over and over again as well. So that matter, of course, is one that has to be considered in terms of how we move forward with the dispense of justice in our country. Who knows, looking forward in the future, whether in fact we might even see around the world the introduction of artificial intelligence in such matters. It's left to be seen to see how that pans out. It's doing quite a lot in many other sectors. Who knows how those things will, of course, continue to be influenced by changes in technology. And, sometimes you've got to face the fact that, yes, technology has shifted a lot of what we've been dealing with, even in the matter of justice. CCTV footage, for example, is a big game changer. If it is, in fact, almost ubiquitous, it really does play a really important role in that matter of enforcement, and of as well evidence, gaining of evidence, which of course has to be admitted in such trials. There was a matter which we heard quite recently on being put forward by supporters of the United Workers' Party, and that of a particular Calypsonian who had apparently performed on at an event of the United Workers' Party. It was actually, I believe, the launch of 5 candidates down in Lakai, and this particular Calypsonian performed. He happens also to be, his day job is that of a police, being a police officer. And, we've seen, sometimes you get these types of conflicts in terms of what you may have as a separate activity out there, and what is what may or may not be allowed. Now, if actually there's a case I think, coming out of the United States. I can't remember the exact name of the individual, but it involved a lady who happened to be a police officer, and I think she was in the Special Victims Unit or something to that effect, Vulnerable Persons Unit, something to that effect. And she also ended up agreeing to perform or to be part of a music video, and in that music video, she had what some may consider to be clothing that was not covering everything that perhaps should be covered. And for many, it seemed to have been lewd. And that music video was seen by some of her colleagues. And invariably, what ended up happening was that I think she was actually dismissed by the police department for this activity or this job that she was doing outside of her main job. Of course, this is not what exactly happened in this instance regarding the Calypsonian. What it was is apparently there was a transfer of the individual, and there was a suggestion that transfer had something to do with him performing on stage. The Commissioner of Police, Mr. Verngard, has indicated that, and he's put it this way, he zero political interference under my watch, is what he in fact has said. And that story also coming from the St. Lucia Times, which I'm going to share this time as well. Commissioner of Police Verngard is adamant that there is no political interference in the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, and has assured that the much talked about transfer of a police officer entertainer has nothing to do with him performing at a meeting of the opposition United Workers' Party. At a press conference on Tuesday, Gard addressed allegations that he had been instructed to transfer Sergeant Calixte Xavier following his performance as Calypsonian Cacal. Xavier received his transfer letter the day after his March 2nd appearance on the UWP stage. Minister for Crime Prevention, Jeremiah Norbert, refuted claims of political interference on Monday. Gard also denied receiving any directive that led to Xavier's transfer. He clarified that the transfer was not politically motivated, but rather a strategic decision to manage the RSLPF's operational needs. Quote, "There is zero political interference in the work of the police, especially under my charge. I have not been faced with any politician or someone involved in politics giving me any kind of interference whatsoever throughout my tenure in the organization," the police chief told reporters. He went on to explain that in an attempt to address the chronic issue of accumulated vacation leave within the RSLPF, 2 sergeants from the Vieux-Fort police station had to proceed on leave. Xavier was chosen as the most suitable officer to fill the gap created by their absence. Quote, "This shift of Mr. Xavier has absolutely nothing to do with Mr. Xavier's performance on a stage. Mr. Xavier has performed in the past on many stages. The content of his lyrics is academic. We've heard it before. I'm not too sure what the hue and cry is in regards to this current position," the police commissioner said. Quote, "I find it very bizarre that a move that may have culminated in persons being given more responsibility would be looked at in the negative. Transfer is a part of the job in the Royal St. Lucia Police Force." Commissioner Gard also responded to claims that the action taken against 2 other officers in January may have been politically motivated. The 2, Jan Gustav and Harvey Taliam, had become embroiled in heated exchanges on social media with Housing Minister Richard Frederick. However, according to Gard, there was an internal report made against both officers, and there was a need for an investigation. As a result, and quote, "For good administration and management, Gustav was advised to proceed on vacation," he said. Taliam was transferred from his substantive position as the special branch unit to the Babonneau police station. God did not disclose who made the reports against the policemen. Asked whether he reported to Frederick, the police commissioner responded, absolutely not. He told reporters that he reports solely to the Minister of National Security, who is Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre. And as I said, that story coming from the St. Lucia Times. It was published by Mr. Tony Nicholas. Now, of course, we have seen lots of allegations made in the past of political interference. And we've also seen the issue of how individuals, maybe even sometimes who are engaged in political activities, and in fact, whether they should remain in their substantive posts. We have heard about the staff orders over the years. Of course, that is a very dated document in and of itself, but written in such a way that effectively suggests that public servants should not engage in particular types of activities that may potentially bring to question their impartiality within the establishment and ensure that they in fact are acting fairly and what have you. Now, of course, in this instance, it's the suggestion was that Mr. God got an order from higher up that that Mr. Xavier Kakal should have been pulled. Now, as to why this would have happened now per se, and why it has never happened in the past, and we've seen the gentleman perform. In fact, that's exactly the point that was being made by the police commissioner on many, many different occasions, on many different platforms. So what would be the issue at this point? And perhaps the bigger issue was the timing of it more than anything else. It coming so shortly after a performance, and then sometimes we make these correlations which are not really correlations at all. Simply because of something happening immediately after something else, we therefore think that it was as a result of such and such. And so, unfortunately, that is how things work, and that's how certainly political minds quite often work in this regard. And of course, we've seen at times, even in the case of political involvement, individuals who are public servants who want to get involved in politics, they are sometimes, usually, of course, once they've declared their candidacy, they tend to be asked to, separate themselves or resign, and so that they can pursue that matter. Of course, the issue of should they not have the opportunity to maybe take a sabbatical, and should they be able to come back later on? Those matters perhaps could be dealt with in some sort of public service legislation. But we also hear sometimes accusations of where politicians are accusing public servants of not doing their jobs. And quite recently, we had a matter involving the one of the hopefuls for that of a candidacy in the Grosley constituency for the United Workers' Party, Mrs. Marcella Johnson. And she raised an issue, I think on the DBS newscast, of a situation regarding farmers in Deramo. Deramo is one of the parts of the rural part of Grosley, in the northeastern part of Grosley. It has some farming that goes on there. Deramo, Labon, for example, those two regions. And she was indicating that those farmers have not been getting the kind of attention that they deserve, because according to what she said, they haven't had an extension officer for over 3 years. And that, of course, is a a remarkable situation, especially in a country where we've got, I think, maybe close to 30 extension officers. I don't know the exact number, but if you look at the estimates, you probably see that, and they're spread out across the various agricultural districts. And the idea that you don't have an extension officer for that length of time is certainly would make people wonder what is going on. And so she was saying that, hey, these individuals they have not benefited from programs that are going on in the government. And she, of course, mentioned that they have for those of you who know Deramo, I'd also know that tends to be drier than a lot of other parts of the country. They don't get as much rainfall, maybe less than 60 inches of rain a year on average. And so she was saying, hey, they didn't benefit from the water tank distribution. You may recall that under a particular World Bank funded project, the government gave out tons of fertilizers as well as water tanks to assist farmers. I think about 2,000 water tanks were distributed to farmers around the island to allow them to be able to store water. Of course, because you've got some areas where they don't benefit from sufficient rainfall, or you want to be able to store water because, of course, you have drought periods, you have dry seasons, and you want to ensure that they can boost their productivity during these dry spells. And so farmers were afforded with these free water tanks, which is a great thing, right? So you could maybe put in your own little irrigation system. You could continue production. And she was saying that the farmers in that particular community were not able to actually benefit from from those water tanks. And that went on live. It went on DBS, and people listening to this would be wondering, wow, okay, this is an unfortunate situation. And only on Monday did we get a retort from the Member of Parliament for Grosley, in fact, suggesting that the individual who may very well have, who was the holder of that office, apparently, that officer, may very well have been a political operative or hopeful of the very same party that she is in, and that individual perhaps is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, you end up in a lot of these situations, and the question is, well, and this is why some people have or take issue maybe with the idea that persons who are holding public service or holding a public office should be not aligned to any one party or another, because they may decide in one instance, well, my party is in power, so nobody can tell me what to do, right? I cannot be touched, because therefore I can just go to the person on top and they will protect me. That's one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin might be, well, my party's not in power, and so, you know what, I'm not going to do my job, right? These people can see for themselves. They voted us out. And that individual absconds and effectively and engages in a go slow, if you like. So that's the other side of the coin, right? And so those types of motivations certainly have no place within the public service, because you can end up in situations where individuals, for political reasons, take certain actions, and so therefore, and those actions are detrimental to the individuals who they are meant to serve. And so we certainly do have to think about these things within a context of fairness and the delivery of those public services to ensure that they are above board. And we've heard far too many times, of course, complaints regarding service coming out of the government offices, and we hear lots of complaints lots of times. And let's hope that, of course, the matter of public services and their efficacy is one that is still something that government is looking towards, because, of course, we do know that there is quite a pretty penny that is spent on an annual basis towards delivery of those public services. That's our dish of the day. We're actually due for our weather report. We're going overtime on that one. We'll be taking that in right now.
This has been The Daily Dish.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. With all kind of tiles, come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gas and vanity. Books, doors, you'll see. Come down to mind nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses Jubilee Lanes, and Slack Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939.
Island style, yeah. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll have to make the right choice. Island style. We got the time that will make you happy. Island style. Oh yeah. We make your dream come alive in Island style.
We are tiles and king sets, mixes and ground. Everything you need is on the house out. For the best price and the latest style. Take a little drive down to Island Style car.
We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, quality, price, service, choice. It's all an Island Style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Bellarosa, Rodney Bay, on the John Compton Highway, Cass Street, and behind Ruby's Gas Station on the Library Viewfort Highway. Or call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style, Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style. This is Radio Caribbean International. It's now time for the weather news.
And also, of course, the 1.1, it's now time for your weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talent Bound. The forecast for Solution Valley for the next 24 hours, the winds will be blowing from the east in the air 16 miles per hour or 26 kilometers per hour. The weather fair to occasionally cloudy skies with a few showers. The forecast for Los Angeles, fair to occasionally cloudy skies with a few light showers. And the weather summary, a light to moderate easterly wind flow will persist over the Eastern Caribbean region during the next 24 hours. Shallow patches of low-level clouds drifting along the wind flow will cause a few brief showers over parts of the region during the forecast period. And this was the weather forecast as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talent Bath.
This has been RCI's Weather News. For more information, call the Weather Hotline at 454-3452. RCI 101 number 1.
Island Style, yeah. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll have to make the right choice. Island Style. We got the time that will make you happy. Island Style. Oh yeah. We make your dream come alive in Island Style.
We are tiles and king sets, mixes and ground. Everything you need is on the house out. For the best price and the latest style. Take a little drive down to Island Style car.
We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, quality, price, service, choice. It's all an Island Style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Bellarosa, Rodney Bay, on the John Compton Highway, Cass Street, and behind Ruby's Gas Station on the Library Viewfort Highway. Or call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style, Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
And welcome back to the lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. Now, of course, the number to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, it is 452-3046. Again, 452-3046. And you can also message in via WhatsApp, 724-0008, if you want to call in on that number as well, you can do so, 724-0008. Now, of course, yes, we also saw a discussion yesterday about the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and we were making mention that a number of countries have gone that route. But of course, the big question is, what is a sovereign wealth fund? And it is an interesting creature because you may have heard of investment funds or investment companies. You may know that there are these entities that are part of the whole capitalistic system that have large resources, large amount of assets, liquid assets usually, and they want to be able to invest. Now, you could invest in different things. You could choose to invest in government paper. That's one route. You could buy bonds or T-bills. You may also decide to invest in real estate. You may go out and you may purchase land. You may purchase buildings, apartments, that sort of thing. You may want to invest in expansion of maybe your company or something to say, if you've got some particular business entity that you have. It might be industry, it might be a service industry, like maybe a hotel chain. But then, of course, you also have the means to invest in stock markets and to invest in companies by purchasing shares in companies. And that, of course, has been a major element, you can say, in the growth of capital in the world and the growth of economies in the world. I think the Dutch were the earliest ones who actually established stock markets back in the 17th century, in the 1600s. And that has grown and become a lot more complex over the years. And certainly, it is now a major way through which individuals invest their money. So the idea of a sovereign wealth fund, because you've got a lot of other funds like hedge funds and mutual funds and companies. People go to particular companies to be able to invest and to be able to say, hey, well, you know what, help me out here. I want to be able to make different investments. And so in the case of the sovereign wealth fund, these are not private individuals who are acting, but actually the government, the state, is taking certain resources that the state may have a surplus of, and they are in fact deciding to create a vehicle or a company through which they can now invest those resources, with the hope that, of course, those resources, that investment will yield a higher rate of return as compared to, say, if they were just left in maybe land or some sort of asset like that. So, for example, the government has land, but it's, of course, land is not liquid. It's not something that is easily traded. It's not very easily sold either. You got to might sell it in blocks, or you may have to may not always get the kind of price that you may want. So there's certain levels of complexity there. But then when you're dealing with these larger trading on a larger scale, on a global scale, and trading in those capital markets, you can then potentially get into areas that and to invest in companies that are yielding higher rates of return, bringing back larger dividends, and so that benefits your investment portfolio overall. Now, of course, we do have entities that might, in some sense, could be considered sovereign wealth funds. For example, in many instances, pension funds are sometimes seen as sovereign wealth funds. And so, like in the case of Norway, as we mentioned yesterday, they in fact are their pension fund is their sovereign wealth fund. So to some degree, you might consider that the NIC is in some sense that. And of course, you'll see quite often insurance companies, they collect large amounts of money, and they've got to reinvest that money so that they can in fact keep up with the drawdowns that are coming out of the claims that may come forward. So they usually, of course, have to be shrewd, very good at investing. So that's the principle there. We've got a clip actually that is available, which kind of gives a little bit more detail in terms of a sovereign wealth fund. And I think we can actually share it at this time. It's actually pretty simple, I hope, because it's actually a clip that is used for A-level students to explain what a sovereign wealth fund is.
Study of globalization, we've been thinking about sovereign wealth funds. So here's a quick primer on the question: what are sovereign wealth funds? Well, basically, a sovereign wealth fund is a state-owned or government-owned investment fund, commonly funded by a government that runs a huge budget surplus or a big trade surplus. You can generate extra revenues, extra funds of dollars and euros and yen from your natural resources that you might export to the rest of the world, building up foreign currency reserves. The funds, the sovereign wealth funds, typically are put to work through investment overseas. They can work as stabilizers when the economy is subject to cyclical fluctuations, or, and this is the dominant theme, I think, the aim of a sovereign wealth fund is to provide long-term security for the national economy. A good example is the Norges Bank. The aim of the Norwegian Oil Fund is to ensure, according to their website, responsible and long-term management of revenue from their significant oil and gas resources, so that this wealth built into natural capital benefits both current and future generations. Now, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund is huge, as we'll see in a minute. It is the biggest in the world. In fact, given its value, it holds on average about 1.5% of all the world's listed companies. The second biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world is the China Investment Corporation, CIC, a sovereign wealth fund that manages part of the People's Republic of China's foreign exchange reserves, and they have trillions of dollars of foreign exchange reserves. CIC, for example, has made many investments overseas. It buys US government bonds, it has stakes in hedge funds, it buys lots of assets around the world, including, for example, a minority stake in Heathrow Airport in London. And as of July 2022, these are the biggest 10 sovereign wealth funds in the world, organized, ranked by assets under management. You can see that 3 of them are in China. The Norwegian Central Sovereign Wealth Fund is the biggest, Norges Bank Investment Management, then CIC, State Administration of FX in China, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Hong Kong, and of course Qatar in the news recently with the World Cup, the Qatar Investment Authority. So this is great knowledge and application to have, just to be aware of who some of these sovereign wealth funds are. They manage trillions of dollars of assets around the world. Well, finally, what are some of the advantages from having a sovereign wealth fund? A lot of people think the UK should have taken advantage of the riches of North Sea oil and gas in the 1970s and 1980s to establish their own sovereign wealth fund, as Norway did, in fact, in 1990. Well, basically, if you have a sovereign wealth fund, it allows you to invest in assets owned overseas. And that money, if the investment is successful and effective, that provides a flow of income back into your country. And if you're familiar with national income measurements, it should lift a country's GNI per capita, because GNI is GDP plus net property income from overseas assets. Those higher incomes, higher per capita incomes, can also significantly boost government's tax revenues. So that can mean, for example, that taxes perhaps don't have to be as high as they would otherwise be. Crucially, the sovereign wealth funds can help to promote economic diversification, particularly for countries heavily dependent on oil and gas. And they can also help cushion an economy after an external shock. If the world price for your leading export goes down, for example, you'll have a sovereign wealth fund or a stabilization fund, perhaps to inject some extra spending into infrastructure or other projects within your domestic economy. And increasingly, this is something I think is worth being aware of. The sheer scale of these funds can also be used actively to promote environmental and social aims. Although most sovereign wealth funds are fairly passive in terms of how the money is invested, the Norwegian Investment Fund has just announced, right at the end of 2022, that they now plan to vote against companies in which they have a stake that fail to set a net zero emissions target, that overpay their top executives, or who do not have sufficiently diverse boards. So signs that perhaps the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund, the biggest in the world, is going to be more proactive in terms of environmental and social aims and issues. That'll be worth watching. But I think just to be aware of sovereign wealth funds is a really good thing to have in your revision notes if you're studying macroeconomics and globalization. Hope you found this useful. Quick primer on sovereign wealth funds. If you did.
All right. So as I said, of course, this is a very simple video that was actually geared towards students of A-level economics, just to explain what a sovereign wealth fund is. And of course, the major takeaway, of course, it is effectively government investing at a global scale, putting aside monies, and which should, of course, be managed or effectively, based on in a very prudent and how should I put it, professional manner, separate and apart from the government. So at the end of the day, it's not the prime minister who is going to be the one who's going to say, hey, well, invest here and invest here. And, there is usually a board, and that board gets advice. There's there are investment managers who are looking at where the markets are going, what are the areas to invest in. So it really is about investment, right? And getting themselves into that sphere of money, right? And as I was mentioning, of course, we've got a tremendous amount of money, capital being invested at that scale around the world. I think it is, well over $131 trillion invested in stock markets around the world. That's an astounding figure, and so it is a way a lot of wealth is actually put in. And of course, you've heard it, like in the case of Norway, for example, they in fact control 1.5% of effectively all listed companies around the world, publicly listed companies. So that's a tremendous number that you're talking about there. There's something like about 39,000 plus, nearly 40,000, you could say, easily, publicly listed companies out there. In the United States, for example, you had about 4,600 publicly listed companies, and the amount of capital that is in those exchanges represents about 200% of GDP of the United States of America. So we were speaking about 62 trillion US dollars in the stock market. And that is really critical because companies, those corporate sectors, they are looking at how they can create wealth, how they can, of course, pay back, for profit, and to pay back to those persons investing. And so that is generally the focus on sovereign wealth funds. And as mentioned, of course, you have to be in a position, however, to be able to be making surpluses. So it therefore means that your economy needs to be doing well, or it therefore means that you've got to have your finances have to be doing well. So you've got to have some level of a windfall. And those windfalls in the past have come from countries that have a lot of commodity booms, usually maybe in oil and gas, but also in minerals, and as well surpluses of trade. So that's just a quick wrap up regarding what a sovereign wealth fund is. Now we're going to try to take a call at this time. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
I always get in the wrap up boy.
Well, yes, well, perhaps you're joining a little too late.
Yeah, well.
But go ahead, caller, please.
Yesterday.
Yes.
You watched what transpired in the house?
I watched part of it, yes. I did not see the entire proceedings, but I did get part of it. Well, is there any particular part you're referring to? Is there a part?
The gentleman, the leader of the opposition.
Yes, I watched his contribution, yes.
He announced to the whole world that he's going out there and in this kind of mode, in a mode, he ready for every attempt to stop him, from speaking the truth and whatever.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So he hype up the whole thing with the expectation that, people would be ready for some sort of, the usual thing that happens back and forth when he's making his presentation. But lo and behold, everybody sat down quiet listening to him.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that man, that piece of strategy, that was so effective. The guy fell on his own sword, man. You with me?
I'm with you, I'm listening.
Yeah, because those of us who have a little knowledge of government, how government runs and governance, would find the points, some of the points he was making was so ridiculous about ministers being in charge means that there's no transparency and no accountability because he's the minister. But I mean, like everybody pointed out to him, every department in government has a parent minister, no?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, that's correct.
Including the statutory boards and
Yes.
Yeah. Ultimately, they decide who cabinet decides who sits on boards and everything. So, and he's saying that in itself, the way this thing is constructed for that particular act is he smells a rat that is going to be, it's not going to be impartial. And a lot of other things, things you were saying that I mean, that was just fodder for the government members, trust me. Because everybody had points, against his, the content of what he was saying. It just felt like, it worked, Alex, because they allow him to speak. Sometimes that's what you have to do,
Well, I think that should always be the case.
That's what you have to do. I think that's a good strategy. Let when people want to speak, let them speak. In any case, it's their right.
Yeah.
Unless in a point of order or something, they filming somebody seriously or whatever. You know what I mean? But yeah, and I feel that we could bring calm to the whole proceedings in Parliament by allowing people to speak, and whatever after they speak, then you examine thoroughly what they have said, and then after, if you have any comments, things to make about it, to debunk whatever, do it. And I feel that yesterday the way the House was conducted is an example of what the sort of thing we're more looking for. You know that, and I'm happy personally that the government members didn't play into his hand, you know, and go ready like him to you know, so that he could have reason. Essentially, you could see, well, he had no reason because nobody interrupted him.
Right.
That is his main reason for asking people to get riled up. Is if, you know, they interfere or interrupt him while he's speaking. And don't interrupt him, let him talk. And then after he talked, then you know. So I just want to make.
Well, you know, generally speaking, I find to some degree that the members, the members of the Labour Party on the Labour Party side tend to allow the opposition, the other side, to speak very freely.
Let them talk. The man is right to speak, but you know, also in so doing, you know, when you give people the right to talk, sometimes you know, it's more detrimental to them. You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to make that point.
Yep.
And, I know I'm over time already. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thanks very much for that, caller. Have a good one.
All right.
And I've actually thought that, generally speaking, we've seen. I was just saying, generally speaking, I find that the Labour Party MPs allow the UWP MPs to speak uninhibited, and as opposed to, and I think to maybe Mr. Guy Joseph, he's almost always standing on a point of order, or Mr. Fede is almost always interjecting.
You mean when he was in the house?
When they were in the house, yeah. So I thought it was a strange accusation, but anyways, I suppose, I think there was only one instance, I think, where Mr. Hille raised a point of order during Mr. Chasney's presentation. And I think what they've now made a major issue of is that he originally said that he did not want any extra time. The MP for Choiseul stood and asked for extra time for him, and they didn't vote to support the extra time. So now that has become a talking point. But anyways, thanks very much for that, caller.
Okay, my brother.
Have a good one. Take care. Now, of course, we're a little bit over time, so we're going to have to end it at right now. We were supposed to have gotten a call on the matter of CONCACAF. Probably we'll try to squeeze that in tomorrow. There's some, I think, football coming up on the weekend, so look out for that. Well, that's it for today, and we do hope that you have a very blessed Wednesday. I'm your host, Alex Shaw Jr., saying goodbye.